after a tense interaction with my mother-in-law, where she harshly criticized my employment and educational background, things escalated when she suddenly threw hot water at me. While I escaped unharmed, the danger was real and shocking. Her actions were unjustified, especially since it was my husband who was unemployed, not me. I couldn't stand her unreasonable behavior any longer. Enough was enough. If this is what you want, I have no choice but to leave, I said firmly. To my disbelief, she looked almost pleased, showing no remorse. Realizing I could no longer tolerate the toxic atmosphere, I decided to return to my parents' home. Little did she know that I had been the primary financial supporter of our household, making around $41,000 a month through stock trading after leaving my job. Even as I left, I felt confident that I could support myself independently. Eric and I met in college, where we both studied economics with dreams of building a career in finance. We started out working at separate brokerage firms, and when he proposed, I eagerly accepted. Our plans changed, though, when Eric asked me to quit my job and live with him at his mother's house after his father's passing. Despite some reluctance, I agreed out of respect for his family obligations. However, after everything that had happened, I deeply regretted that decision and resolved never to help his mother again, even if she faced financial hardship. Eric was his mother's sole companion after his father passed away during his middle school years, and as an only child, he felt a strong responsibility toward her. I understood his loyalty, so I agreed to move in, and within 3 weeks, we settled in his family home. Initially, his mother seemed happy to have him home, but her attitude shifted dramatically when it came to me. Her cold gaze and dismissive remarks made it clear that she didn't approve of me. I tried to stay positive, ignoring any faint mutterings she directed my way. Soon, living with her proved even harder than I had anticipated. One morning, she woke me up at 5 a.m., ordering me to make breakfast. Her reason? "Don't just lie around because you're not working," she said curtly. Although the hour seemed absurd, I got up and prepared the meal, trying my best to ignore her constant critiques. By the time breakfast was ready, she still found reasons to complain. It was either the timing or the flavor, with her claiming my cooking was somehow an attempt to sabotage her health. "Are you trying to kill me with these salty meals?" she snapped at me. Her accusations were unsettling, and I couldn't hold back any longer. "Why are you so harsh on me?" I asked. "What are you saying?" "I'm not being harsh. Are you trying to paint me as the bad guy?" she shot back, overwhelmed. I could only nod silently as she listed off chores for the day, barely giving me a moment's rest. Her criticisms became relentless, nitpicking my every task. There was always dust I'd missed or a stain I'd overlooked. After about a month of this, I reached my breaking point. I confided in Eric, hoping he could help. "Your mother's been so critical every day, could you ask her to ease up a bit?" I asked him hesitantly. Eric's reaction surprised me. He looked pale and didn't respond immediately. Concerned, I asked, "What's wrong? Did something happen?" He hesitated before revealing that he had just been fired from his job. "It's due to company downsizing," he explained. "So, you're officially unemployed now?" I asked, still in shock. "Yes, I'll be let go in a month," he admitted. Thankfully, I'd been able to earn around $41,000 monthly through stock trading, using what I'd learned from my job in securities. With this income, we were financially stable, so I tried to console Eric, setting aside my grievances with his mother, for now. But as Eric's search for a new job lagged, he started spending more time at home, often making excuses. Meanwhile, I continued to endure my mother-in-law's harsh treatment, driven by my determination to support Eric through this difficult period. "Shouldn't you start looking for a job more seriously?" I suggested, hoping to motivate Eric to take his job search more earnestly. "I'm looking, but it's hard to find a company that's a good fit," he replied, his tone lacking any sense of urgency or commitment to finding new work soon. Reluctantly, I continued supporting us financially, but my mother-in-law's sharp criticisms only grew harsher over time. Each day, I felt more drained and exhausted. At first, I convinced myself it was temporary and that I needed to be patient while Eric was out of work. But as the weeks passed, that justification faded, leaving me feeling worn down and unappreciated. One morning, Eric left early, perhaps to finally pursue job leads more seriously. After he was gone, I went about my usual chores. "Make sure it's spotless. Do it properly," my mother-in-law barked from the living room, lounging with her coffee as she tossed sarcastic comments my way. Frustrated, I chose to ignore her, hoping she'd stop, but suddenly, she flew into a rage. "How dare you ignore me? You're nothing but a mere daughter-in-law without a real job," she shouted. I tried to focus on my cleaning, her hurtful words blurring in the background, but she wouldn't let up, storming over and yelling, "Still ignoring me? People like you, unemployed and uneducated, don't belong here." In her anger, she suddenly splashed her hot coffee water at me. "It's hot, please stop," I cried reflexively. stunned by her aggression. Fortunately, the water wasn't scalding, so I avoided serious burns, but I was shaken. She smirked, her expression cold. This is exactly what I mean. If you're not working, then leave. Drained and hurt, I realized I'd had enough. Fine, I'll leave. Good, she replied sharply. That makes it easier for everyone. Leave now. I quickly packed my belongings, unwilling to endure another moment of her hostility, and left the house that very day. When I arrived at my parents' home, they were surprised by my sudden appearance but welcomed me with open arms, offering the warmth and relief I desperately needed. I waited for a call from Eric, but days passed with no messages or attempts to reach out. Feeling isolated, I decided not to contact him until he made the effort. A month went by at my parents' house, and still, nothing from Eric. With each silent day, my affection for him dwindled, and I began considering divorce. Then, early one morning, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Glancing at the monitor, I was stunned to see both Eric and my mother-in-law outside. What now? I muttered, baffled by their sudden appearance after all this time. Yes, how can I help you? I asked through the intercom. I've forgiven you, now come back home, my mother-in-law barked, her tone as cold as ever. Forgiven me? For what? I replied, perplexed. I hadn't done anything needing her forgiveness. Frustrated, I ended the call, but they remained, knocking on the door more forcefully. Don't ignore us, just come back, she yelled, her voice echoing down the street. Not wanting to create a scene, I reluctantly opened the door and let them in. After they settled on the sofa, I asked the purpose of their sudden visit. It was baffling, considering she was the one who'd insisted I leave. Now, here she was, asking me to return. You were the one who told me to leave. I don't see why I should come back now, I stated firmly. My mother-in-law huffed, accusing me of being childish. She claimed she'd forgiven me and expected me to return. She even suggested she was doing me a favor by letting someone unemployed and uneducated stay in her home. But I'm not the unemployed one, that's Eric, and if I go back, you'll just exploit me as before. What about your son? Does his employment status not matter? I retorted, hoping to clarify the truth. Eric looked startled, and my mother-in-law was visibly confused. It became clear that he hadn't told her about his job loss. Pressed further, Eric finally admitted he'd been laid off. Apologies and justifications followed, with Eric confessing he'd been relying on my income to keep things stable. My mother-in-law, furious, scolded him for hiding his unemployment. Why keep this a secret? What are we supposed to do now? She demanded. Eric tried to reassure her that my income would suffice temporarily, but she only grew more agitated, calling him useless for not actively seeking a job. Fed up with his excuses and this entire ordeal, I couldn't believe they expected me to just return and pretend as if nothing had happened. When she insisted I come back, I refused, pointing out all the mistreatment I'd endured. Their visit quickly escalated into a heated argument. When I brought up the time she poured hot water on me, Eric turned to her, horrified. Why would you do that? He asked, stunned. She admitted to acting out because she felt ignored, triggering an argument between her and Eric. Their shouting became so intense that I had to intervene, reminding them that this wasn't their home to create a scene. At this, they seemed to change tactics, shifting from demands to pleas, promising they'd never mistreat me again. I could see through their empty assurances. Eric's promise to find a job sounded hollow, and my mother-in-law's vow to change seemed just as insincere. I voiced my doubts, explaining that I could no longer trust them not to take advantage of me. Their silence only confirmed my suspicions. Leaving them in the living room, I went to my room to gather my thoughts. 10 minutes later, I returned to find them sitting in silence, heads bowed, apparently reflecting on the situation. Exasperated, I broke the silence. How long are you going to sit here? It doesn't change anything for me, I said. Instead of further words, I took a decisive action. I handed Eric a document I'd prepared in advance, a signed divorce form. Eric looked down at the document, his face filled with shock and disbelief. I looked directly at Eric and said bluntly, "It's a divorce form. I'm done with someone who refuses to find a job and didn't even bother to reach out after I left." "Wait, don't do this, it's too sudden," Eric pleaded, but his stubborn refusal to acknowledge his own faults only fueled my resolve. I stood firm, determined to move forward and leave behind the chaos that had consumed my life. My decision was final, and there was nothing he could say to change it. Eric, still reeling, tried to question if divorce was too drastic. "No," I replied, resolute, "this situation is your responsibility." I cast the same sharp look at his mother, making it clear that her actions had played no small part in my choice. Reluctantly, Eric signed the papers, warning me not to regret it. Yet, I felt only relief, certain that any regret would be his to bear, not mine. "I'll submit the papers. I don't want anything from you, just go home," I stated, finalizing our separation with a deep sense of release. Breaking free felt harsh, but I knew it was the only way to escape the relentless mistreatment from my mother-in-law and the weight of Eric's unchanging situation. 3 weeks later, as I settled into the calm of my parents' home, I received an unexpected call from my former mother-in-law. She informed me that her house's electricity and gas had been cut off and hinted that I might somehow be responsible. I calmly explained that I'd stopped covering their expenses once we divorced. Desperate, she asked me to cover just 1 more month. The request was absurd, we were no longer family, and I was no longer obligated to support her household. I declined, suggesting she turn to Eric, who had promised to find work. When she continued to beg, I held firm, ending the call and blocking her number to finally cut all ties. At last, I had severed the toxic connections that had bound me. Gradually, life became peaceful and simple, far removed from the tense and exhausting days I'd left behind. At my parents' home, I rediscovered a sense of ease and tranquility, grateful to have distanced myself from such a toxic past. Several months later, while on a quiet holiday, I received a message from Eric. He apologized for everything, admitted his past dependence on me, and shared that he was now working at a factory. He even mentioned that his mother's behavior hadn't improved, saying he missed me and hoped I might return. But reading his words, I felt no urge to reconnect. Instead, I blocked his number, choosing to firmly close that chapter. 8 months after the divorce, I was introduced by a friend to someone new, a kind, dependable man who treated me with genuine respect. Despite our age difference, we shared a strong connection. We weren't rushing toward anything serious, but the moments we spent together were filled with warmth and laughter. He brought stability and joy back into my life, allowing me to focus on the present and enjoy a sense of true peace. With him, I found myself truly moving forward, grateful for each day and feeling hopeful for what the future might bring.